One, this is a 52-year-old man, and that has caused surprise because it's somebody who's older, doesn't fit the normal sort of profiles. Well, what are your thoughts on what has happened here?
Well, I think it's already been mentioned that there is no straightforward profile for individuals who engage in armed violence. I mean, usually we associate armed violence and political violence with young people, but this case shows us that there is no one rule that applies to the whole process. But I do think that when we use terms such as radicalization and extremism, we are extremely careful as to these terms. And the reason why I say that is because the term radicalization, which has gained so much traction and is being constantly and repeatedly used, is based on a framework that doesn't actually have any evidence. So when we talk about radicalization, the official definition is the process by which an individual leaves non-violence and becomes engaged in armed violence. And there is no empirical evidence to prove that the core reason why individuals become involved in armed violence, which the government's prevent strategy on its very first page says is ideology, actually causes terrorism. So we have to make sure that we are not using these terms uncritically. The same applies to the term extremism. I mean, one of your guests just referred to political violence through violent extremist Islamism. I mean, these are, polemical terms that don't actually mean anything. And what they essentially do is they play according to this historic discourse in which we, the civilized West, are essentially at war with a barbaric opponent that cannot be brought to the table. And the only way that we can defeat them is by basically excluding them. And partially one of the reasons why political violence has become, or a militarized form of activism by Muslims has become more kind of normalized, is because the structures, the geopolitical situation and the international structures of the world powers essentially exclude Muslims from articulating an identity that seeks to govern according to a political interpretation of their faith. And I think until we recognize that these are the drivers of political violence, political factors, we can sit here and talk about radicalization and extremism and how we can, implement more bollards outside of Parliament or structure our landscapes to ensure security. But the reality is there will always be somebody who will be willing to jump into a car and to pick up a knife from B&Q and to undertake acts of violence. So I would issue a word of caution around using these terms uncritically and to actually look at the empirical evidence, which doesn't give us a simple profile into why people become involved in political